So welcome, and hope you got some food and some coffee and all of the above. So hopefully this is the hardest session time, because it's like usually the time where people are filled with their bellies and then start to doze off. So I'll try to make it as interactive as possible and get through some stuff. So yeah, a little bit about me. I'm Geeta Schmidt. I was the former CEO of Humio, and a little bit more about me is I'm an Indian American woman. Kind of strange in terms of my whole career, but I'm also a US citizen, a Danish resident, a CEO of a UK company, and now the VP at an American company. So kind of been all over the globe. First time in Brisbane, but maybe I'll add Australia to that list as well at some point. I was a first-time CEO and startup founder, so I think this is a bit of a story about thinking those thoughts or starting a company or being part of a startup. And so I want to share some of those experiences that we had building Humio. And if you are thinking about doing a startup or are in one or have been part of one, some of these stories will probably ring true to some of the experiences you've had. And this is a bit that I always put in here because I'm also a mom, a wife, a daughter, and sister and friend. And one of the things that you always get hit with when you are starting a startup is you forget that last line. And I think some of the most important people in supporting a journey is those people around you that deal with your crazy travel schedule or miss you a heck of a lot or you miss really important things. So just wanted to put that there. Just dating myself a bit, I started my career at US Robotics, which is, if some of you remember, if you had a modem, yes, some of you do. So I started there in '94, and then I started working at Sun Microsystems. Many folks who've been part of the Sun revolution, we were the dot and .com. Was involved in a lot of the new product introductions with Java and Solaris releases, worked in financial services as well, so had kind of a combination of product and industry experience there. And then I made a big shift from the US and moved to Denmark and started working for a small company at the time called Trifork, 30 people at Trifork at the time. Now it's now also running a conference in Australia. So it's grown from 30 people to over 1,000. And so I've been part of that experience. And then Humio, which I'm going to talk primarily about today, started as a CEO there. And then CrowdStrike has been through acquisition. So let me start off with a bit of the journey. So how many of you here have been either part of a startup or are in one or think about it all the time or. Okay, great. Well, it's good to see some folks that know what some of this is about. So, all right, I wanted to start a little bit around kind of our timeline, to give you some idea of what happened in our story. So in 2016, we established Humio in January. 3 founders, 2 technical, and myself started Humio in January. And it's everything sort of moved very rapidly in our sort of progression. I mean, they like to call it high growth startup, but it's also like insane, crazy, things happening all the time. So, and a timeline that goes this fast, you sort of run into a lot of decisions you have to make or changes and some of them are good and some of them maybe not so good. And so I wanted to share some of the things more transparently around the things that were good and some of them that weren't around what we did. But to give you an idea, in 2017, we got some seed investment. We went from Aarhus, so we started the company in Aarhus, Denmark, which is a small town, but really had a global mindset from the start. And so we realized that we needed to get outside of our own borders, get some seed investment, and start the US and UK sort of go-to-market. So we started that in 17. And we sort of quickly started to get customers that were at an enterprise stage. In 2018, we started building our products for companies like Bloomberg, Netlify, Sparbank One is a large bank in Norway. So we started getting these very large enterprise customers, which brought some attraction from VC funding. And so that's where we, in 19, started our Series A with Excel. Excel's one of the leading VCs in the world. Familiar to some of you here is Atlassian, a local company that's done quite well, that they funded very early, but CrowdStrike and Spotify and a number of those have been funded by Excel. That also accelerated how quick our growth started to move. So we started experiencing 10x ARR. ARR is annual recurring revenue, where you start to really get your motion together. 2020, we also got Series B funding, and that was through Dell Technologies Capital in the United States. A lot of it had to do with trying to get more interaction with the security segment, because we were seeing a lot of traction there. So we started with Dell, and we also were getting quite a bit of growth. Also, we're named in the Gartner Cool Vendor for IT Ops, and so we started getting all this traction. And then, bam, in March 2021, we were acquired by CrowdStrike. CrowdStrike, if you don't know, how many here do you know what CrowdStrike does? Okay, so not so many. But CrowdStrike is essentially, claim to fame is endpoint data that we've been putting into the cloud. Really revolutionary in the way that we've approached it from data perspective. And it's actually, I think, the second fastest growing SaaS next to Salesforce, and I think Zoom is probably maybe number 2. It's number 2 or number 3, but like amazing growth in 10 years. Very large company, and we do a lot of security as well as stopping breaches with incident response. So very different segment for us. We came from dev and IT ops, and we started looking at security. And then 22, we get into this year, and in June, we started building integrated products that we go to market with. Falcon data, you could imagine in an organization, all the endpoints generate a hell of a lot of data. And that data is interesting to store and in a logging solution like Humio, so you can do ad hoc search and audit and compliance reasons. So we really built sort of something that we can go to market to together with a price point that makes sense. And lastly, just a couple of months ago in September, we renamed our product from Humio to LogScale. So you can kind of see the span. It sounds kind of, like a bunch of milestones and maybe a bit boring, but like reality is there's a lot of pain and tears that have gone into that very short period of time. We were, 9 people when we were selling into Bloomberg, and I remember trying to go into New York and act like a really big organization, and that we had a massive engineering organization in Denmark, but we really didn't. So there was a lot of fake it until you make it, right? Like, and I think many of you that are in startup worlds know that feeling, and every kind of day feels like, okay, we've got to give it all, or we've got to figure out a new plan. And so some of that is part of the story I want to share today. But a big part of our story is along the lines of really thinking global from the start, really important in terms of what we can do today. You can build a startup anywhere these days, which is amazingly powerful, right? Like, and COVID has also actually shown us that we can also sell products not right next to our customers. And so this amazing capability of being able to run things in the cloud and run things globally is a new opportunity that, traditionally you'd have to be like in Silicon Valley to build a startup, and that's basically gone. We did $32 million in funding, not an amazingly large amount of money, but like, again, I'll talk a little bit about investment strategy and what you need to think about in terms of, or what we thought about when we were making those decisions. And then we were acquired for $400 million by CrowdStrike, and I'll talk a little bit about how our acquisition went and just share some thoughts around what that was all about. All right, so we're gonna go back to 2016, and this is why we needed to change the world. And I think many of you who are in startups feel that way. And I thought I'd share our story. And this is our story. So my CTO and my co-founder, Christian, we all were on a mission from God. And we used to like play the Blues Brothers to just inspire us, because guess what? Everyone says no in the beginning, or everyone is really negative around the ideas that you're coming to market with. And we wanted to build the world's best logging solution on the planet. We wanted to get it out to as many people as possible. And a lot of it had to do with the pains we felt ourselves, and we felt this was the best thing ever that we've built. But the reality is that, you know, if you don't believe it, no one else is going to. So we really took this very, very seriously and built a culture around it, and I'll talk a little bit more about that today. But the inspiration for Humio came from a specific project, and this project was one that we were running at Trifork, where we built the national prescription service for the country. So all residents' prescription drug history stored in the solution, and the access for doctors, for pharmacies, for surgeons, all accesses the same system. And when we built it, we developed it, and they also asked us to operate it and run it. And so number one, it had to always run. Number two, we also wanted to be able to monitor and manage the system to see when something would go down. And when it did go down, we needed to really remediate the problem and get it up and running again. And the reality is that this was a whole new phenomenon for Trifork and the developers that were working on this project, because it really meant life or death in some situations. You know, so you were in surgery and you don't know if someone can take a certain medicine and they're not able to complete the surgery. And so when our system was down, our developers and teams were just like, you know, felt full responsibility for this. And what logging did was give us the capabilities to understand the system and understand like the health of this system that is actually managing the health of a country. So, so the impact was big, and we really took these logs seriously. Now, we were working with this 10 years ago, and we were running our competitor's product at the time, but it gave us the idea of value in logging, but it also showed us the drawbacks of the solution that we were using, and then we ultimately started doing this with other solutions, other logging solutions that are out there, and man, gosh, we knew we could build something better. And we wanted to, and we really felt like, wow, if you could actually have sub-second search on the multi-terabytes of data that you'd love to be able to put into a system, could we get that out to the world? Like, this is why it's really, really important to be able to access this data quickly, and how do we get ourselves inspired to build this? So the other thing that was happening at the time, and this is from 2020, but you know, there was an incredible amount of, and it still is today, the growth in unstructured data is just skyrocketing. And we could see that happening already with a lot of our clients. And they're unable to at least put this in a place where they can actually access and query it in a timely fashion. And so there's a lot of budgeting that was going away, or people were just avoiding logging for the reason of the cost of storing data. So we thought a lot about what is the problem going to be in the future, and how do we build for the future versus just trying to knock out the current competition. So this was a bit of what got us jazzed about doing something and got us excited. But like, you know, mission from God is pretty serious. Like, you know, and I want you all to remember that. So like, if you do decide to do this, there's a lot of blood, sweat, and tears, and you have to believe in what you're doing. Otherwise, it's really, really hard. All right, so getting into the product. So these are sort of the product choices, and this is kind of simple, but I'll talk a little bit through the choices we made. And we coupled the commercial choices with the technical choices we made because it was important. Because a customer was choosing to invest in something, and those are the commercial parameters, but also how could we also take technology and make it interesting from a cost perspective or a feature perspective that gives us a competitive advantage in the market. And so on the commercial side, we started off with a SaaS solution, but we realized that our product was incredibly good at scaling and performance and sub-second latency. And we built it for that. We built it so it's easy to run and it can scale like heck. I mean, like, and that was really important in the mindset of when we were using a solution. We wanted something that we could throw all of our logs into and not worry about. So we were looking at trying to figure out how we have a 10x differential in terms of the types of performance numbers that our competition had. So we realized many of our larger customers, and many of our larger customers today are actually self-hosted logging with Humio or with LogScale. Pricing them made sense. That's a tough one because like you're constantly trying to build something that people will buy. Essentially, if they're not paying for something, then it's not really a real product. That's my attitude. Like, if you're not getting money, then go back to the drawing table. And if they are going to give you money, they want to make sure that money makes sense, right? And pricing, some of the things we did was unlimited log ingest, which is for some of the companies like Bloomberg who do several hundred terabytes a day. They run it themselves, and so we wanted to give that flexibility for them to expand it very quickly and be able to get all the logs in. So that was a choice we made. We took in design win customers, like I mentioned some of these along the way. The design win customers, there's interesting things to think about here because you could do design win customers and then build consulting projects. Or you could listen to what your customers are saying and think about, oh, we're building for this market, or we're building for this use case, and we're building for this workflow. That tens of thousands of customers will be interested in this, in the future. So that's a real choice to make. And in terms of the design win customer idea, bringing them close is also an advantage. Like the level of the type of support that an engaged engineering organization can have working on Slack with actual users, it's amazing. It also invigorates your engineering teams and your developers because they're actually feeling the pain of the customer and vice versa. So we use that very, very much in our planning and our execution. Said global versus local. I've talked a lot about that earlier. And lead generation by segment, like thinking about where you actually sell and like actually speaking that terminology. Security was a very new area for us. We had to kind of change a lot of the ways we were interacting with security users when we were talking or marketing to them. On the technical side, yeah, scale and performance was something that we were quite obsessed with. Has to do a lot of sort of our background around this. And then we focused really on logging. Like, what is important when you're looking at logs? It's usually ad hoc search on lots of data, and you want the answers as fast as possible, and you want to be able to store this data efficiently as possible. And so all of these parameters were things that we did to make sure that we could make sub-second latency happen with index-free. So taking indexes away, essentially, and timestamps is really all we sort of take when we put data in. Schema on read versus ingest, not like inflating your indexes before getting your data in. That was one of the areas we really focused on. Others have to do with how we store data efficiently, where we put it, compress it significantly for long-term retention, and also including making it easy to have search on cloud-native storage capacity and S3, so you're not having to re-ingest your logs and send them through again, which many companies kind of make you do. Open standards for log ingestion was something that we really took that approach around. We didn't really have an agent, and we assumed that most of these customers are moving from one place to the other, so make it as easy as possible. And then this use case thing, developer, IT, security, ops users, we realized that pretty quickly. I have a story around that. Like our first customer was probably a crash and burn. But you always learn from the crash and burns, I think. Our first customer was a BI data science use case. And I don't know, someone sold it, and we were thinking, OK, this is going to be tough because they're not used to interacting with a solution like ours. But let's try it. And they bought it, and they started using it. And we realized that the data scientists weren't as familiar with our query language, which suddenly was sort of like we were doing a lot of training and trying to help them, but they were just not getting it. So it got a little tough to say, I really don't think this is the right solution for you. Of course, you don't want to say that to your first customer, but it ended up, they churned, and we really quickly realized, wait a second, that's probably not the segment we want to go for. And then, from developers and IT and security ops, the query language just is more natural for these users. And reality is we spent more effort on focusing and not spending time going after these sort of, other use cases. So the use case stories is a bit part of it. This is how it kind of feels when you're building products. And this is back to this, who is the ideal user? The data science example is very much like, who is our user? You're constantly asking that question. I mean, we still ask this question as well as we're expanding as part of CrowdStrike. So the journey is always ongoing. Like, how do we make it more relevant for more users? The other thing that if you're looking to build a startup is like, what is that workflow that the defined personas that you choose to build something for are living through? And how do you actually build the feature set that affects that persona significantly? This is probably the #1 problem in startup land. It's like, what can we do with the limited resources that we have? And constraints are really tough. Like, we all dream a lot about what we can do, but then we look at our team and realize, oh my gosh, that's gonna take years with 9 people. And really figuring out like what is most important. And the hardest thing and the real thing that you have to do a lot of the time is say no. And there's tons of good ideas and there's tons of things that you can spend time on, but you ended up, not being able to have the time to build it out. So there's, for us, a lot of the SaaS functionality that we were building kind of died over time. So, now it's coming back now that we're part of CrowdStrike, but it's just like we didn't have a lot of time to build out a lot of the functionality at the time as the customers were there. How do you differentiate yourself? What is different? And here, this is where engineering, really, really good engineering, really, really good focus on technical capabilities can make the difference. And for us, that's really what we focused on. It's like, you can have an excellent go-to-market, you can have an excellent front end, you can have a lot of different things, but the technical capabilities of your product can make a huge difference to being a success or a failure. And then where is it you provide value? Like, where does the customer just jump up and say, oh my gosh, this is amazing? And like trying to really fight for that is such a big part of building a startup. Like, it's such a big part of making a difference in the daily lives of someone who's running your solution or using it every day. This is a little bit of how we went from product market fit to growth, and we always had customers in our DNA. Like, a good example is one of our customers early on had a DDoS attack, and they were using our product. Our entire engineering team started building analytics and dashboards and trying to help this customer in the current situation, almost like in feeling the pain of that customer. Now, again, early, but the type of trust you build when you do that type of thing is amazing. And that actually goes from someone who was at that customer suddenly goes to another place and remembers that experience. Users, how do you find your users? Where are they? How do you talk to them? And then how do you wow them? And wowing is probably the hardest thing, because that's, oftentimes, especially if they're technical users, there's a lot of questions. Like, they're not ready to be won over if they're happy with what they're actually using today. So there's a wow factor, and really thinking about how do you make this demo, or make the description, or make everything sort of like amazing that you wow them. And then we think about this a lot. Make it really, really hard to churn. Like, keep people with you. And those are a lot of things. It could be product functionality that's coming out often, and and that we're delivering and releasing feature functionality that they think is important along the route. It could also be crazy awesome support. It could be also sales reps they want to talk to versus not talk to. Like there's a lot of elements in this, and they all matter. And I think this is a full story in trying to keep our customers on board. And we've been really quite successful in that. Our model has also been that we encourage more data, and data into the system equates dollars. And so in that sense, like creating a model or a business model that allows you to grow with more in terms of the pricing model. Be sharp about what you can do and you can't do. Like, honestly, it's like there's not just one solution on the planet that's going to solve everything. And we were very, very focused on logging. In observability, there's metrics and tracing, and there's other solutions, and there's a space, and we all kind of have a space in this space, and really kind of defining what you're best at breed at and others are, and understanding how those elements work together, instead of just saying you can do it all when customers can see through that because they know how that actually feels when you're using a product. And understanding the market, I talked a little bit about that. Understanding where you are in that market is important. Cost structure is an interesting one. It's just kind of boring, but it's really, really important, not so much in the start maybe because you're trying things out, but as you grow, your cloud costs can escalate astronomically very quickly. You get good rebates when you're early and startup land and small, but then suddenly those don't count anymore and discounts aren't available. So, so thinking about profit margins and thinking how technically you can actually build to be efficient is really, really significant and important. Pivots, new market opportunities, like we didn't see security coming at all, and now we're part of one of the largest security companies in the world. And we didn't know that when we started our Blues Brothers gig, but it fell onto us, I guess, in some senses. There's a lot of logs in security, and there's a lot of data in security, and we needed to learn how to understand this market, understand the use cases. So that was essentially a pivot for us and a new market opportunity. A lot of our team was hesitant to go into it. Hesitant because we didn't understand security people. We understand developers, we understand IT ops, we didn't understand security. So we took it to the premise to actually watch what these threat hunters and these SOC analysts are doing every day. Like, what do you do? What do you query? How do you react to that? How do you respond? And we really created a problem-solving mindset to understand the segment that we were going into. All right, so going into the team itself. This is the team, and I have to preface that both Preston and Christian are 2 meters tall, and so I'm actually standing on a box just to be that tall, so in the picture, so in the frame. But this is a kind of just a simple diagram of how we set up our founding team. And reality was there was 3 of us. We had to have roles, because otherwise, without clear roles and clear understanding, and also understanding of what are you good at, what are you bad at, and I'd like to do what I'm good at, and the others would too, right? And so we really decided as to what are our roles. So Preston, who's on, let's see, the left here, he is the CTO of Humio, and was the CTO of Humio, sorry. And distributed systems background, PhD, he just makes things move faster, comes up with great ideas that he takes from academia and pulls them into the product, and really makes huge changes to implement, that others implement oftentimes, right? Our VP of engineering is Christian, who has a lot of use case understanding, built a lot of the prescription service, understood logs and logging, and understood how to run the team. And he had the heartbeat of how did the team work, and how did we build it, and who should we hire, and how do we build engineering. And I was pretty much the one doing everything else. So I don't know, taking the trash out, to getting funding, to finding our next VP of sales, and all of those types of things. So, but there was something that we had that was really, really important. We trusted each other, and we had really, we were on the same page. We were incredibly aligned on our decision making. So like if we decided to go let's say, sell the company, it wasn't just because one person thought that was a good idea. And I think like when we talk about founding teams, a lot of times the founder could be one person. It's really, really hard to run a company if you're alone. You need people to talk to. You need people to like throw your ideas back and forth. You need a team, and this was very important for us. And then the shared purpose, like we really shared the mission, and that showed when we interviewed people. It showed when we talked to investors. It showed when we talked to new customers, and we were like on the same game plan. And that's incredibly important. The purpose part is huge because you're not going to get anyone to join you on your purpose unless you take it very, very seriously and you believe in it. Because like I said, everyone says no a lot, and go back to the drawing board, or that's a bad idea, and you got to wake up and do it again. And so, yeah. So some of the things that get hard when you're starting building a team, and by the way, this is in California, and there's a sign in Rattlesnake area with the Humio sticker there somewhere, so FYI, if you see a Humio sticker in the wild, you'll know why. Yeah, so part of the challenge comes when you go from the founding team and you start to build out. And that's really when we went from like sort of a core team of about 9 people, friends and family, that we knew, people we either worked with or knew from past jobs, et cetera. And then you need to start to build the team. As soon as we got Series A funding, it was like, oh, you're too few people, you've got to grow. And you make a lot of mistakes. Like, how do you keep focus? How do you hire and onboard people quickly? Like, we had a team that really, really understood the product. There were only 9 of them. They were burning out, and we needed to grow an organization, in different geographies as well. And so we made some mistakes. We didn't do the best job of onboarding lots of folks. We threw them out into things. And we learned, sort of after the fact that we could have done that better, right? But it's one of those challenges. It's not easy, and I think you also have to, like, I guess, assume that not everyone is going to be a fit, and so that's a tough one, especially when you're trying to grow quickly. Distributed teams and shared context is a big problem as well. We all kind of live that. I think many of you, if you work in an Australian, office in a larger organization, you feel it as well. It's like, how do we actually know each other? How do we really understand each other? So we did a lot of offsites and tried to keep connected as people because it's important and it's an investment, and like without the people, we have nothing. And so part of that was really kind of building in shared context and shared friendships in some senses. Accountability is also hard. You're also managing lots of different time zones and trying to be able to know that folks are accountable for things. So with all that mess of lots of people coming on board and whatnot, we really had to be implicit about our values. Like the first team kind of knew each other. We just knew what our values were. Like, yeah, we're building, a system that can log everything, answer anything in real time. Great, that's our kind of planned mission. But like, what are our values? What do we care about? And I know there's a lot of BS around doing values, to put it on a slide deck, to tell everybody you've got a culture. But we used to actually really abide by this culture, and we use it in a way of thinking and when we talk to each other. So customers in our DNA, which is definitely one of the things I talked about earlier, we start from a place of trust. Like, I think that's kind of a big deal. Trust with our customers, trust with our partners, and trust with each other. And so being really open and trusting was a big thing that we had to kind of say implicitly. We also had different, cultures. We had Americans, we had Danes, we had Brits, we had Germans. We had a number of different types of cultures coming together, and we wanted to kind of sort of blast that away because sometimes culturally those can be challenging. So trust is hard to get, and so it also oftentimes comes with honesty and being open. So we really pushed that quite a bit. Problem solving, yeah, we are problem solvers. Like, we like problems. Like, we want problems. Give us problems, right? And if you aren't one of those people that likes to do these things, we could kind of know that you'd probably fail here. You know, sometimes those problems came at midnight, right? And unfortunately or fortunately, you know, real problem solvers love that. And so it's not the best work-life balance solution, but maybe we're not the right place then, right? And there's discussions around that. Bias toward action, ideally, you know, do something. Doing something is better than doing nothing, was really our attitude. So, okay, we can always fail and fail fast and go back, but like, do something. And then quality, like, again, we've got this focus on quality. And so these kind of things, we said them over and over again, and we actually use them when we talk to each other. So, you know, so it's like, oh, I've got this issue, and, you know, because I'm a problem solver, I'm gonna go attack the problem, you know, or, you know, we're coming from a bias of action, I'm just going to go do this. I know it might take some cycles, but like, I'd rather do it than not do it. And so we used it in the way we spoke to each other, and employees referred to some of these. So it was a way to think about it. All right, so kind of to the investment side of things and acquisition. These are just some of my thoughts. I'm sure some of you all might have your own, but I'll share some of the things that we did or thought about through the investment strategy side of things. So venture capital and other types of funding. So we started as an accelerator. Trifork actually put some money in early on, and we really did a lot of seed investment early on. And the great bit of that was mostly they were uninvolved in what we were doing. We didn't have like a board that's like trying to ask us exactly what, you know, we sold last quarter or whatever. Gave us time to think about our problem, think about who it's best for, think about product market fit. And that gave us some flexibility in terms of the product that we were building. When we decided to do Series A and with Excel, it was the right time. It was the right time where we needed sort of, you know, global expansion and sort of, you know, someone with a strong reputation in the market to say, hey, this is like the next best thing in logging. You guys should take a look at it. So one of the good examples of Excel is that they, like, after we closed the round, they sent me to, well, the largest bank in the world does like a Shark Tank type of event. And so I go to the Shark Tank, and myself and Christian, we do our song and dance, and we tell everyone about what we're doing, and then you come back, and it's like it's in New York, and it's really kind of, you know, it's a definite New Yorker style. And one of the leads, Larry there, he was just like, why don't you just say you're the Splunk killer? Like, you should just go out and say you're the Splunk killer. And we're like, okay, we weren't aggressive enough. We weren't like, you know, doing what we should be doing. You know, fast forwarding that, we have interaction with them now at CrowdStrike, and like, you know, now we're talking to this company, and so it's a little bit of a like shift. And then he remembers that presentation from Shark Tank, and so part of it is like you never know who will help you along the way, and so it's a painstaking approach around doing pitching and all of that. But you know, other types of funding. There are seed investment, there's angel investors, there's, you know, lots of companies that, you know, put money themselves in for a long time before they go any of these routes. I would like to say that VCs are also very different. Some are investing in seed only, some are investing in later stage, but like all of it really matters around who is your partner, like who is it that's investing in you and will be on your board. So it's worth thinking about building out this board that can get external kind of knowledge into your company, because you're working so hard day to day on what you're building. Market size, I think I talked a little bit about that, but being sharp about that when you're talking to investors is really, really important. Like, where are you going and what are you going after? And in terms of a market and a market size. You know, when is the right time? I think the right time can be everything from, oh my God, we're running out of money, to, you know, we probably need to think about another round because we are seeing this growth and we're going to need to take advantage of it. or market timing. Like right now isn't the best time to be raising funds at the moment. It's a little bit hard. VCs aren't really, coming with the money very quickly. So it's a little bit around timing, market, and what your company needs, and thinking about that in a longer term. Involved stakeholders. We've had really involved stakeholders that are advisors or have been involved to help us in this phase. So I would say that all of these things are important, and like sometimes you can get an angel investor that's probably more useful than your board, but they're not on your board. So, think about it. Geographies, and like I said, board members and network. Like building the network's really, really important. Like whoever is going to help you get out to more people is really, really kind of useful along the way. So I would say that some of this is, you can ask me questions about the whole investment stuff. I think there's lots of stories people go through if you're curious. So, all right, getting to CrowdStrike and Humio. So, yes, we were acquired in 21, in March of 21, but the conversation started in November of 2020, just around Thanksgiving, and it was a really wonderful first talk. I was able to talk to the CEO of CrowdStrike, and George, he called me and said, "Hey, what do you think?" And it was a very open discussion, transparent, comfortable, like we could talk about what we're good at, what we're not, how the technologies complement each other. We don't know, we haven't thought about all of it, but in some essence, we knew there's a lot here that could be created to go faster. And so we looked at the complementary tech. This is actually the biggest thing. We aligned on our goals and our sort of company values. Like CrowdStrike is crazy about the customer. I mean, like obsesses about customers. That's very, very important. Trust is incredibly important. And all of these sort of things have to do with kind of like going into a company where you're like, we don't really fit in here. Ain't worth it, because like, in some senses, you might as well just walk away and go on to, be yourselves, because like, taking a decision like this has to do with like coming into a larger organization that's either going to be comfortable or very uncomfortable. Thought a lot about what our impact was with the overall organization. And so right now we have, go-to-market, we have platform capabilities. We can help them with a lot of places where there is existing Splunk. And then there is also a massive TAM that they haven't had prior to Humio, which is around selling to IT and dev application workloads for logging. So we're helping with the new TAM, but also helping their existing customer base. And this was very much part of the thinking of like how would the impact for the whole be. Incentives for the team, that's a big deal. You want to keep people. Like this is, we had 45 people when we got acquired. So like every single one of them was incredibly important, and they need to want to stay. And so we did work a lot of that out, and it's something to think about if you're in that situation. Executive sponsorship and transition of integrating into the larger organization. Like, one of our lucky situations was the exec team is very involved in this acquisition. CrowdStrike is, we're the largest acquisition they've had to date, and it did have an impact on many areas. So we were lucky in that front, and still are today in terms of the way that the transition is going. So it's something in terms of these kind of situations, it's worth thinking about, is it the right or wrong? We also had earlier interest from others, but that just didn't feel right. So again, it's got to also work on those parameters. We're in scale-up mode now as part of CrowdStrike, and I like to feel like we did really stay on the green side of the chasm, and you probably all know the chasm itself, but like, crossing it is really, really tough, especially on your own on the startup side. So this was what the CrowdStrike acquisition was so important for us on, is that it was going to give us this chance to jump the chasm very, very quickly. Now, there's consequences of jumping a chasm very quickly. You may not be ready. You may not be able to sell to the pragmatists and the conservatives, and you may not have the right feature set, et cetera. So we're going from customers in the hundreds to customers, we're 20,000 customers, right? Suddenly the game has changed in such a significant way. And the timeline that we're trying to do this in is unnatural. Like if you're doing this on your own, it's like, okay, you naturally sort of build up and you naturally kind of do the chasm shift. But we have this unnatural also, like almost like we jumped onto a rocket ship and we're moving like at exponential pace. And so a lot of it is, it's new challenges, new problems to solve, new things that we think are interesting. And so that's something to think about when you're looking at scaling up. Whether you're doing that on your own or whether you're looking at like your team and saying like, hey, this is still part of the values, the part of the reason you joined. And really back to the mission that we started on was we wanted to get this out to as many people as possible. And this is the fastest way we're doing it. And so we're still on the mission that we started out on very early in our journey. So with that, I'll end it with Q&A if anyone has questions, but yeah, that's that.
Got a question?
Hey, thanks for the talk. It's really good. Could you talk us through how, minus the first one, how you went through acquiring your first 10 or so customers, those first few customers?
Acquiring the first customers? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, first it's like, okay, you go out to your friends. You try to sell to them. Ideally, Christian sold to his first, to Xamarin. He was working at Xamarin, and so that was someone we could sell to. But it also changed over time. We were out at a lot of conferences like this, and meeting some of these customers just with our demos and our booths and doing sort of the marketing that goes along with it. But it is, a bit of it is being aggressive. I mean, it is quite a bit of an aggressive game. It's sort of like, all right, just try it. Some of these folks were on trial for a while, right? And flipping that to being actual paying customers, takes some time. But the first customers were like close to us, which was probably close in Denmark and some of our friends that we knew in places. And then suddenly things started to change, and you had stories to tell, a story of this or a story of that. One of the biggest things was I did force the guys to get out of the office and do a presentation at GOTO, actually, at GOTO in Denmark. And it was one of the first places where the video was, taped and people saw it, and we got inbound. And so, yeah, so that's how some of it started. Yeah.
No more questions? This one? Thank you.
I might have missed this part of it, but it may not have been in it actually. But what were the things that almost killed you throughout your journey, in your mind?
Well, yeah, like I think one of the first things that almost killed us is in that phase of the early days, right? Where we were, you get no a lot, like when you're trying to sell a product, and I could just see like our early like investment that we had, it was just like very quickly, dissolving, and I had to make something happen, if you want to call it that. Like I needed to find a way. I was just like, we're not going to last here, people, right? Like, the way we were burning money wasn't actually equating with the type of customers we were getting. So it was a bit of that, like, all right, if we're really going to do this, then we need to be really smart about our investment timelines, right? At that point in time, I think we had, like I came in around May of 16, and like we had probably money until the end of the year, and I'm like, this isn't gonna last. Like, could be that you're building the greatest thing on the planet, but like someone's gonna raise some funds, right? So things like that, that's one of them. The other kind of make or break feelings are just really like burnout. Like, I mean, I can't say it enough, it's super hard. And, I love many of our early folks, but they were just tired. You know, they're SEs, they are support, they are building product, they're training, and they just look tired. And so I actually spent a lot of time on making sure their wives and their kids and that we did things for their families, because like they weren't there for their family. So like this burnout thing is a very real problem, and you have to watch it. And that's another reason why investment is very significant, significant in making sure that you can get the right resources to be able to build.